Hi, just a video of how to set up and transfer your collage onto your canvas panel. So I have my collage and I need to transfer it onto the new or the clean canvas panel. So what I'll do is use tracing paper, and I can use tracing paper to lay it over the dominant shapes, trace them, and then this is where it gets a little repetitive. But to be able to then transfer it onto the canvas panel, I need to take this, flip it over, and then coat the lines with a very soft graphite, like a 4B or a 6B pencil, and then flip it one more time over and position it in place on my canvas panel. And then by applying pressure over these marks, I'm forcing the graphite I put on the back onto the canvas panel. So hopefully you can see where it's been pushed onto it. And if you do this across your whole collage, you'll be able to transfer the composition and be ready to paint. So when you set up, what I recommend, I'm right-handed, so on the right side I have my palette paper. This is a disposable paper that's very great to use. It stays clean. You can pull it off and remove it when you're finished. I also have laid my paints out, and this corresponds to what I put in my handbook, where I have a separation of warm and cool colors which follow the color wheel. Warm and cool, warm being yellows, orange, and red, cools being greens, blues, and violets. And I've laid them out across the top, just put a dab of acrylic paint, a little healthy amount, maybe the size of a penny. And I have white at the end. And what you notice missing is the color black. We do not use black because we mix our own. And that's very helpful in getting to know color and getting to use color. For example, this color was made by using burnt umber and ultramarine blue together, and it's a good basic dark color that you can use when you make grays. You can mix grays with it and create a nice neutral gray, so you don't really need black. And also, as you're working on this first assignment, you're going to need to darken or tint colors, and it's more appropriate that you use the complements. So if you remember from design, or if you've never had design, a complement is a direct opposite on the color wheel. And when you add complements together, they neutralize one another, or they'll naturally gray it down. So if you're working on an area, for example, like if I was mixing one of these blues, I notice that it's not a pure blue, it's not intense blue, but it's compromised, so I would add probably a little bit of the warmer red just to gray it down. And as you work on this process, you'll probably find that most of these colors are compromised in some capacity. They're not pure, they're not a pure color. So you'll have to add a complement to gray it down. So once you have your composition transferred and you have your paints laid out, you can begin mixing. And I want to add too that I have my water set up here. I've got a water container. And if you're curious about this thing, this was on your materials list. This is the scrubber. And this is put in the water to act as an aggregate so that when you're cleaning your brushes, you have something to wipe it against. Acrylic paint is very thick and very pasty, and you can't clean a brush thoroughly by just swishing it around the water. You need to rub it against something. So this is where the scouring pad helps. It'll allow you to rub it against, and since it's perforated, it has holes in it, it allows the acrylic paint to drop down to the bottom and gives you a much cleaner brush. So I prefer too, when you come to mixing your colors, that you get into the habit of using your palette knife too, because the palette knife covers more area. You will not lose any color in the palette knife like you would if you just used to mix a brush. So most of you may be used to using a brush to mix colors with, which is fine, but if you're mixing large quantities of color, and if you want to save it, you can always do that. Acrylics will stay in an airtight container. A couple reasons I like this one, you're not wasting paint, and another, you can mix the color up and you can hold it up to whatever you need to. Like in this case, the collage, if I need to, I can physically hold it across or in front of to see how close I am or how far away. If it's too warm, I can cool it down. If it's too cool, I can warm it up. If it's too dark, I can lighten it, and so on. This is going to come in handy too when we're doing our self-portraits and we're mixing flesh tones, because you can actually mix up a color and hold it against like your flesh to see if it's the right color or if you're in the ballpark. So just a few words on the basic setup, palette layout, palette paper, brush, palette knife, importantly, and then transferring this onto your panel so that hopefully when those of you working at home are ready to work like this at home and begin to piecemeal and go through your collage and take each area, paint it as best you can, and then place it in the square or in the shape. But as you do this too, I mentioned this in class, try not to make the paint too thick or too opaque. You want to maintain some luminosity or some translucency. And also when I'm painting, you notice too, I'm using the side of the brush, not the tip of the brush. And that just allows for the ground, or in this case the canvas panel, to come through, because I don't want a fully opaque color area. I want it to be semi-opaque, but not fully opaque. So I still want some of this white canvas coming through. And that's something we'll discuss as the semester continues, and especially as you get into your other and more advanced paintings. So thanks, and I hope this helps.